Thank you, Mr. President, board members. As you know, that back in 2009, there was a water conservation ordinance that was passed, and it had set what we see up here, that in stage 2, you can water 3 days a week, 25 minutes a day, for a total of 75 minutes. Stage 3 is 2 days a week, 25 minutes a day, with a total of 50 minutes, which we're at right now. And stage 4 is 1 day a week, 25 minutes for the day, a total of 25 minutes. Can I have the next slide? Just hit that. Yeah, just start it again. You just hit it. Okay. This ordinance didn't take into consideration a number of things. The extreme weather that we have out here, including the freezing, and as you know, we did a temporary order that, allowed people to water during the day when it's freezing temperatures. And also our soil condition and the water absorption. And it didn't address drip systems. So right now, the way the ordinance was set up, if you were dripping, you had to still follow those water times accordingly, only 25 minutes a day. So what we did was we looked through it and we said to make it more efficient. So go to the next one. Out here and talking to the other experts and everything, is that it's important to water a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening during the watering times. We also changed the watering times. One of the things that had to be fixed is the old ordinance actually had summer watering between 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening, which is during the heat of the day. So that was an error. We had to switch that. And also the wintering time, they had it from 6 at night to 6 in the morning. We know it freezes then. So the times have changed, as you can see in the ordinance, where it's from, I think it's 7 o'clock to, or 6 o'clock till 10 a.m. for the winter. And it says there, if during those times, if it's freezing temperatures, the time restrictions are lifted. But it's 3 days a week in stage 2, 12 minutes in the morning, 12 minutes in the evening, with a total of 72 minutes. Stage 3, which we're in now, is 3 days a week, not 2 days a week. It spreads it over a period of time because that takes care of the plants better. 8 minutes in the morning and 8 minutes in the evening. And I can tell you that John Houghton and myself, that's how I watered my house for forever. It's just doing it 8 minutes in the morning, 8 minutes in the evening. So it works. Stage 4, as you know, if we go to stage 4 in California, that's dire straits. All your lawns are just basically dead. There's no water in the ground cover, no water in the lawns. It's only essential bushes and trees. But it only had it 1 day a week for 25 minutes. We thought it was more appropriate to do it 2 days a week, 6 minutes in the morning, 6 minutes in the evening. As you can see, our totals are just a couple minutes under what the state had been talking about. We're allowed, being an urban water supplier, that as long as we're meeting our goals, we get to pick what's good for us. And in the state code, in the code that you just adopted here a few meetings ago, it allows us to adapt because of our weather environment and our conditions, and that's what the state has moved to. Also, we changed some of the car washing. The car washing was like, you can only do it between 5 and 7 at night. What if you get home and I want to do it at midnight, and it's okay, right? And so we changed a few of those. We added in there that we want to use drippers, but you can't go over the maximum allotment of water that it says, and the formula is in there. That comes from the state, and there's a little formula that you have to do, but I think everybody uses the drippers responsibly, as long as it's not cooling and running off. So that's the new proposed watering system. We can go to the next slide. And this is what the comparison is. So we're actually, for stage 2, we're actually 3 minutes below what the state was saying, but it's more efficient and it supplies more water when it's needed. And then stage 2 that we're in right now is 3 days a week rather than 2 days a week, and it's 48 minutes rather than 50. So that's where we're at now, and that's just a better efficient. So, staff would like you to consider and pass this ordinance. Also, the other thing that we did on this ordinance, you see a complete ordinance rather than amending. We restated and amended it. So now you don't have to go back and look at 3 ordinances to see what the law is. This is the ordinance that's going to control. So, do you have any other questions?
The penalties on it?
This has nothing to do with the penalties. There's all penalties on if we don't. Within some of the other ordinances that you pass, there's penalties, and the state wants us to go out there and and look at what people are doing if they're overwatering the sidewalk. That's a whole other thing. This is just for the water conservation. To see, to basically, because we had a lot of customers coming in and saying, hey, this watering ordinance might, it's freezing at 6 o'clock in the morning. I can't water then, so we decided that we have to change the whole thing, including for summertime, because watering twice a week during the summer is not going to cut it.
directors, questions?
Thank you.
Public
I'd like you to recap the one that I'm interested in, because I didn't get all of it in time. But I have a drip system. I'm in stage 2 now. We are in stage 2 now, is correct?
Correct.
And so the
Yeah, we're in stage 3 right now.
we're in stage 3. So
Correct.
could I just write down the key figures for the stage 3?
Right, it's 8 minutes in the morning and 8 minutes in the evening.
He's asking about drippers.
Yeah, drip system.
Oh, the
He's
drip
asking for
system?
drip.
Yeah, the drip system, it's in there. I don't have my engineer here, it's more of an engineering thing of calculating the water flow and everything for so many square feet and everything. But I think for the most part, if you're keeping your system and everything and you're under, you know, your bills or within the range that they're supposed to be, there's not gonna be a problem. You know, it's only when we come out, if we came out, if somebody was like, all of a sudden their bill starts going up and they have a bunch of drippers or they have a bunch of sprinklers and then we would have to end up in being, because the state says we have to be the water auditor in landscaping like that, and then we'd have to be looking at that. But if you're using it judiciously, there's not a problem with it.
We had a conversation a meeting back, or several meetings back, and we were talking about the fact that drip system, even though it was supposed to be allowed, the figures that we have for drip system would not be recognized, at least in the old way, before tonight or before this.
But you went by doing the times?
Yeah, and so it was a matter of time, but the point was that the drip system requires a longer period of time.
Right, you are not under, if you're on a drip system, you are not regulated to 8 minutes in the morning, 8 minutes in the evening. You are not. You're not under any time restriction. Just a time of day and the day of the week.
Oh, time of day.
And day of the week.
Okay.
And just, you can't
So
pull,
how
you
many
can't pull
days?
an overflow.
We still have 2 days?
No, you're on 3 days.
3
It'll be
days.
3 days. And in the code, it's still, if you're odd or even, you know, address, it's still the same days.
Okay.
Okay, but we've expanded it. So if you look at the, afterwards, if you stay after, I'll pull it up right out of the code
Okay.
and highlight it for you so you can see
All
what
right,
the
thank you.
So it's section 6F of the ordinance. 6F in the ordinance.
I don't think he has a copy of it. So
Oh,
we'll
okay.
get him, I'll get you a copy of it after.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other public comment?
My yard every other day for 5 minutes, and I only do it in the evening. And what's the time of the evening again?
Okay, it's gonna be, it's summertime, so it's, I have to look at that again. I think it's from,
You have to go by your address.
Right, even or odd. We gonna continue as last year?
Change whatever.
I'll find it real quick, so I can.
Because I know during summer is coming, I don't know about you people, but me being a grandparent now, retired, my grandkids come during the summer. I always have 2 or 3 of them all the time, just need more showers.
Next page.
So I just want to know,
Sure.
this will affect me also, won't it?
Right, do you have an odd or even address?
I haven't even,
You have an even. Okay, so you can water on Sunday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays
right?
during the summertime from 8 p.m. to 7 in the morning. And you're restricted to 8 minutes in the morning and 8 minutes in the evening on those days.
Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, I only do 5, but I just want to take consideration, because my grandkids will be coming. So that's going to save me there, but that's going to be more showers and everything else. See?
Right.
So I'm
Yes, this doesn't allow you to do it 5 days a week, only 3 days.
Oh, no, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And also still, there's no car washing on Saturdays, correct?
No, the car wash changed.
At the car wash place, let's say I want to go underneath my tree to wash my car.
No, we changed it to any day of the week from 5 p.m. till 8 in the morning. Just not on one day, because you might work on Saturday. So, you know, the staff and I decided that as long as you're keeping it within, you know, and it has the restrictions in there that you have, the turn off nozzle and all those things.
So there's no
Day restrictions for washing.
There's no restriction. Let's say my wife and I are the only one in the house dwelling right now. So everything's going good. Is every time I come in, I ask, okay? But now the grandkids come, do I get anything extra for having them, or no, I still gotta go by?
For the water restrictions
Yes.
for the lawn, yes, you still have to go by
Not
that.
the lawn, I'm saying overall water, I'm gonna be paying for it. If I don't wanna jump to a 4, you're gonna charge me $25, because I'm 3-4 points ahead. There's
No.
gonna be,
It takes into consideration
Yeah,
everything. It
yeah.
includes
You would
your
just
showers
pay,
and
you would pay for more water, that's it. There's no penalty right now for if you start using a astronomical.
you'll at least tell me ahead of time, at
Yeah,
least
we're
they
gonna start
notice
looking
that
at
you are kinda high, and I can come down and talk.
Right, yeah.
I I know the grandkids are coming. So I just don't want to, I don't want to be up here, you know what I'm saying?
Well,
on you
my
guys.
experience with grandkids is they don't take showers.
You never get dirty, go to bed with the bugs, huh? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we've been working on that rate study since the last time that we've talked to you, presented it, and we came up with even some better rates than we had before. So staff is very happy with the rate study right now. One thing I wanted to just highlight before I introduce Tim Gallagher from GEI is that there are a lot of water districts in California that have gotten into this one situation. And the situation is during this drought and during conservation, there has been less revenue brought in because people are not using enough water. And then the water districts have to turn around because they're short of money and they have to raise their rates in order to make up for people conserving water. Now, you know how that goes along with taxpayers and ratepayers. Here you ask them to conserve water, and then you turn around and you say, we're going to raise your rates because we're not getting enough money. This rate study does not do that. It does the opposite. If we end up, if people don't use any water or they cut by 50%, we recoup the money that we need through the base rate to pay for administrative fees and pay for doing business. It's only HCF fees and commodity fees that actually go up or down depending on how much water you use. So it protects us for that. So I'm going to introduce Tim from GEI. He's going to do the presentation, and if you have any questions, you can direct them to Tim, you can direct them to me, and we'll try to answer them the best we can.
Thank you very much. And you have a PowerPoint presentation. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and present the results of the rate study. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So Mark Rosamond is the project manager on this, have a lot of district projects. I'm the project lead on this, and we also have used Mark Store, who's a modeler. He does rate models. It's one of his areas of expertise. So he actually did most of the work on this, but he's over on the East Coast, so I'm presenting it. Just as kind of a matter of references that we looked at in preparing the rate study, we looked at prior audits of the district, prior budgets. We did take a look at the prior rate study, what was done last time, and as Ron mentioned, this does propose quite a bit different structure than what was proposed last time. We looked at actual billing and usage data, and then put together a proposed rate model, got input from district staff, and went from there. Go ahead, next slide. So just as kind of an overview of what goes into a rate study. First, we look at historical billing data. We obtained 5 years worth of usage data. We obtained detailed billing data for several years. And the next step is getting expenses and categorizing those expenses. And as Ron mentioned, it's important that the expenses are categorized appropriately in terms of what is the fixed cost that the district is going to incur regardless of how much water is used versus the variable cost that's going to change depending on how much water is being used in the district. Kind of step 3, we evaluated and set future variables that we thought were appropriate in terms of projecting future costs, looking at what we think is a reasonable assumption about growth, about water demand. Then looking at the same cost categories, we projected future costs in the different types of categories, and those are what's used to set the proposed rates. And then lastly on there, number 6, we have a comparison of what, looking at the model, with the rates that we proposed, what would the resulting revenue be to the district over the next 5 years based on those rates, and how does that compare with our projected expenses? And one thing I forgot to mention, if it's all right with all of you, I'd prefer to walk through the whole presentation and then do questions at the end. Just a lot of your questions might be answered as we go through, but certainly if you have any questions, we can go over those at the end. Next slide. So in terms of variables that we looked at for this rate analysis, We did consider a few things that weren't really a big issue in the last rate study. And the biggest item on there is the one on the top, the groundwater adjudication and the cost of purchasing imported water from ABEC. As the adjudication moves forward in the district's allotment of groundwater decreases over time, the need to purchase a different source of supply, and we're assuming ABEC in the rate study, is quite a bit more expensive than the cost of groundwater, and so that impacts the future rates. I kind of mentioned this already, but system growth rates and water demands, I'll talk about our assumptions there in a couple slides. We also did look at whether addressing the chromium-6 issue would cause a substantial cost impact to the district, and we don't think it will, and I'll explain that in a couple slides as well. And then we just have our other regular expenses like we looked at the last study. Next slide. And one more. Sorry about that. So in establishing cost categories, we looked at 3 cost categories for all the district's expenses, current and projected, that go into establishing what we propose the rates to be. The first is a fixed charge, and these are costs that reasonably would be proportioned equally to each user. So some administrative costs, utility billing, meter reading, those types of things tend to be just an equal cost for each user. It doesn't matter how much water you're using. So we added up those costs, divide them equally across the number of meters. The second is a capacity charge, and that also goes into the base rate. So it's a fixed rate, but it's based on capacity. So if you have a larger meter with a higher capacity, the costs associated, some maintenance costs associated with just being able to provide that capacity go into the capacity charge. So we added up the expenses in that category and divided them by what we call the number of equivalent meters, which is, so say you've got a 5/8 inch meter, we'll call that 1 meter. If you've got a 4-inch meter though, and let's say that has a capacity to supply 10 times the 5/8 inch meter, then that's 10 equivalent meters. So that's how we divided those costs. And then lastly is the variable or commodity charge, and that's basically the costs that are associated with actually delivering a unit of water to a customer. So we again have those costs up and divide them by the usage. And we also do propose a tiered rate, so I'll get into that in a couple slides. Next slide. So this table just shows the proposed allocation of costs into those 3 categories. The first column there on the left is the fixed non-scaling at last fiscal year about $600,000. Next column over is the fixed scaling costs, which are based on, again, on the costs associated with providing capacity in the system at about $1.5 million. And then the third column there is commodity. And so those are costs associated with actually delivering water to customers at about $1.8 million. So that kind of serves as the baseline in terms, these are actual costs, and then we project it forward from there. You'll notice a column on there that's blank. It's purchase costs. So that's in there in the future when we get into needing to purchase water from ABEC. You'll see numbers in that column when we get into projected future years. So the total cost to operate the system during fiscal year 2015 was about $4 million. Next slide. So in terms of the assumptions that we use for projecting future costs, we made an assumption on growth just based on the last few years of growth. The system has grown by about 80 connections a year, so we felt it was reasonable to assume that continues. And of course, there is additional fixed costs associated with those additional connections. We also assumed that the usage associated with that growth will be proportional. So if the service area grew by 2%, then the usage will grow by 2%. In terms of cost escalation along with the usage growth, we assume that costs are going to go up. So all of the fixed costs that you saw on the previous slide, we're assuming that they increase 3% annually, basically just to keep up with inflation. The variable costs, and I'll go into a little bit more detail, we're assuming that those increase by 8% annually. Most of what goes into the variable is power and at some point imported water from AVEC. Based on trends over the last few years, it's been about 8% annually. And if you go to I think the next slide. So just to go into a little bit more detail on that variable cost, it's an important component. We put together a couple tables here that kind of illustrate where we think the district will be before we get to the end of the 5-year study that we looked at in this rate study, in terms of your needs to bring in imported water and the costs associated with it. So currently we're not required to bring in water from AVEC, but as we get into the ramp down of groundwater production rights because of the adjudication, the end goal with the adjudication, at least what's documented currently, is that the district's production allowance to produce groundwater will be reduced by 2022 to around 400 acre-feet a year. So the remainder of that water demand is going to have to be made up by some other way. So we're assuming that's by purchasing water from AVEC. The first couple of years, the way the adjudication is set up, the first couple of years, groundwater production allowance is not ramped down. So you'll notice in 16 and 17, your production allowance stays the same as it was in 15. The next 5 years following that, it's ramped down incrementally each year over 5 years until you hit that 404 acre-feet. So the bottom row in that top table shows what we anticipate the demand to be for AVEC water in the future. So you see starting in 2018, when that first ramp down hits, you've got a small demand for AVEC water. As you go forward, that demand becomes larger. So I'll get into the costs in the next slide. But on the bottom table on there, I mentioned that we took a look at Chrome 6 and whether we think that's going to impact the district's costs. And the answer is we don't think it will, assuming that the way you mitigate Chrome 6 levels is by blending with AVEC water. If you look at the bottom table there, this estimates the demand the amount of water that would be required from AVEC to blend down Chrome 6. And we're assuming you need about 50% imported, 50% groundwater. In 2020 is when that requirement hits, so you'd have to bring in about 1,300 acre-feet of imported water to blend down your groundwater. But if you look at the table above, we need about 1,300 acre-feet of AVEC water because of the adjudication. So basically, you're going to have to bring that water in anyways. So the Chrome 6 requirement really doesn't add any cost to the district. Next slide. Expenses and the usage expenses. However, in 2014 revenues, most of the revenues collected were based on usage. So they weren't quite aligned correctly. So based on the proposed rates, if you see as we go forward by 2020, the cost categories and expenses are aligned more closely. So that's all that shows. So moving on to the sewer fund, the water fund was the more difficult one. Sewer fund is pretty straightforward. We only proposed 2 cost categories, fixed and variable, where the fixed cost, you add up the total cost, you divide by the number of connections, and that's the proposed rate. With the variable, costs are divided by usage, and obviously sewer users don't have meters on them, but the water users do, so that sort of serves as a surrogate to estimate their sewer usage. Next slide. So the sewer system cost, most of the costs are in the fixed category, about $2.2 million. There's a small variable cost in there, mainly associated with power. a little over $100,000. And the total system costs in fiscal year 15 were about $2.4 million. Next slide. So in terms of the assumptions going forward with the sewer model, we assume the same. Basically, most water users also have a sewer connection, so we assume they grow at about 80 connections per year. We also assume sewer flow grows proportional to service connections, like the assumption on the water system. In terms of cost escalation, again, the approach was really similar. We assume the fixed cost increased 3% annually to keep up with inflation, and the variable, which is a small component, power costs increased 8% annually. Next slide. So based on those assumptions, this slide just shows the current rates and the proposed rates. And you'll notice in the base rates, the proposed rates are actually lower than the base rates. And I think Brad, if you want to explain that when we get to explaining that. The commodity charges are a little higher, but again, the commodity as a portion of the overall bill is a pretty small piece of the bill. Next slide. So this table shows the projected fixed and variable costs going forward. So last year we were at about $2.4 million in total expenses. We projected that increases to about $3.1 million by 2020. And those expenses were used to set rates, like I said. Next slide. So this slide just shows a comparison of anticipated expenses and revenues. Again, where you've got $2.5 million in expenses today, escalating up to about $3.1 million in 2020, and then the associated revenue with the proposed rates. And basically, we just propose setting rates to where you're just collecting revenue with just a small, I mean, it's basically an immaterial cushion, but a small cushion between revenue versus expenses. It's pretty straightforward with the sewer system. Next slide. This is the last slide in my presentation. This just shows a kind of a comparison for a typical user in your system and what their bill looks like currently versus what their bill might look like based upon the proposed rates. So what we did is we looked at what is the average user for each meter size, 5/8 going up to 6-inch meter. What's their average usage, and what would the corresponding bill be for the water system and the sewer system? You can see, I'll just point out on the top one on there, the 5/8 meter, their water and sewer total bill in 2015, based on current rates, would be about $66, $67. Based on the proposed rates, their water costs would be higher, their sewer costs would be a little lower, their total bill would be about $74, or an increase of about $7 a month. And of course, that cost gets higher when you get into the higher users, the larger users. And with that, I think that's the end of my presentation.
Question.
So with the way this rate's set up and the stability fund that you're going to have, which, we need that. We need that as an agency, not only the sewer fund, also as an agency.
Okay. When you're doing a rate study and you're looking at it, there's no analysis on recommending reducing the costs. All right? Another one is reduced price of AVAC untreated water in a wet year. There's no discussion in here about us buying groundwater rights in this proposal, and we're doing that. That has to be factored in. Inflation, they say, is at 3%. I'd love to see a 3%, because I got a nice pay raise the last 2 years if it was 3%. The inflation rate is not 3%. It's less than 2. Okay? And, these are just things that are there.
Did you want us to address those, or?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I guess the question I guess what he's getting into is that
We have the right to come in next year and say we got cheaper water, or we got other things.
And reduce the rate.
We can reduce the rate.
Okay, and what we did on this before, and we explained this before, is there is a best case scenario, which you said if there's a wet year, but the thing is we can't predict the wet year. That can't be factored into a rate study that we might have a wet year later on. Also, we didn't factor into it, what happens if we have to do replenishment water? That's going to be $700 to $1,000 an acre foot. We didn't factor that in either. So the stuff that you can't really predict, you don't factor in. We can only factor in a rate study what we have today. And today we have AVAC saying that they pay, that we have to pay $485 an acre foot, and it's going to go up about 8% a year. So that's why we didn't factor in banking water. We didn't factor in, can we buy water? Can we, as you know, we've been working on purchasing water rights. If we get water rights, the cost of those water rights are going to be a lot less than what AVAC water is going to cost. But we don't have that. We can't count on that. We can't set a rate study and then 2 years from now we don't have the water rights and we have to go back to the people and raise the rate. So that's why that was not factored in.
Okay, well, one of the things that bothers me is in the first year you're going to jump the rate by $14.89. In the second year you're going to jump it by 52. Third year 55. The fourth year is 54 cents, and the last year is 56 cents. Why didn't they spread that out over the 5 years?
Because we've been running in a deficit for a number of years. The rate study should have been done a number of years ago, and so we're being, as you know, with the budget, we're running about $1 million in the red every year, and so we're trying to catch up. So you do that because if you did spread it over a period of time, you're going to be in debt next year, and you're going to be in debt the next year, and you're going to be in debt the next year. The only time you're ever going to catch up is maybe in the 6th year. So the rates would have to, you'd have to bump people's rates up larger than that every single year in order to catch up because you're still running in a deficit. So this is the prudent thing to do is, and that's why, when we first had the rate study, we were first doing it, that first bump was not as low as it is. That bump was pretty large.
Supposed to be
Now,
$50.
right, and we lowered the sewer rate, so that balanced out from the one that I gave you before. So when you're talking, when GEI showed you that the low bill, the person was using 3 HCFs at I think a 3/8 meter, it's going up $7.42 that water and sewer together. And compared to other water agencies and the bump that they usually get, I thought that was pretty reasonable. Because, and when you talk about, there's nothing in there talking about the cutting, no, that's a budgetary thing. So what we do is when you get the budget in July, that's when we cut. That's when we're looking at what cuts we have, what capital projects you want to do. All those questions are done in there, and there's nothing that says that if we don't cut costs later on in the future, if we don't get pumping rights to pump water, that we can't lower the rates in the future. But these are things that we have to deal with what we have today, so that's why we didn't include that. All those things you said about cutting costs, as you know, for the past 8 months, all we've been doing is trying to cut costs, cutting on overtime. In fact, right now, you don't see John and Brock here, because instead of them being here, they're out there fixing a leak right now and saving on overtime. So we're trying, the agency and this budget, you're going to be getting the new budget for the next fiscal year, and we're going to do the budget cuts. And like I said, if we end up being, flush with money, we do a great job, then you can always think about lowering the rate.
Any other questions? Can you explain?
The more usage you have, the more wear and tear. A lot of that is overtime going out there fixing leaks, payroll, putting more pipes in the ground, and so staff and engineering calculated that how much do you think that's going to go towards the commodity rate? Because if you didn't use the pipes at all, they wouldn't be breaking. The more you use them, the more things break, and so that's why it was calculated like that.
If you calculated the commodity rate less, then the commodity per unit would be less, and the fixed cost is going to be $34 would be closer to $50. Is that
Correct. Correct. It would have been up to about $54 rather than $34. So we really worked hard at trying to capture the costs that are really related to the rate, to the proper rate. Going through each line item and saying, hey, this should be allocated towards base rate. This should be allocated towards commodity rate. And so that's why we have a rate study and a rate system that actually will not increase people's rates if they start saving money or saving on the water.
And we can reduce the rates as time goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you have a budgetary year and you say, look, you know, say we pick up $1,500 acre feet of water rights. Well, that's not gonna cost as much as AVAC water, it's only gonna cost us $89 or $100 a pump, you know, whatever the cost of the loan is or however we acquire that water rights, then it's not costing us. We have to go on that, we don't know if we're gonna be able to purchase that. We don't know if there's gonna be no more drought, there's gonna be cheap water that we can buy from Northern California. We don't know what AVAC's rates are really gonna be. I don't think they're ever gonna lower them. So we just have to go by the data that we have now the best we can. And I don't know, I can't answer, Brad can probably answer Mr. MacKay on the cost of living, whatever the cost of living is. I think that's the standard right now of using 3%. I can't answer that, I'm not a finance guy.
We read it. It is 3% is an industry standard for inflation. And as we were talking, I just pulled up a quick federal bank historical trend, and from 1999 to 2015, average inflation's been just about 2 3/4.
So that was close to 3%. And I would rather judge on the side of, yeah, do 3% rather than do lower, because then if it goes up any higher, then, you know, especially with this world economy.
And just to add to that, the reason it wasn't 3% is because 2008 had negative inflation in real estate.
I mean, the feds have actually been contemplating actually doing a negative interest. So, you know, I mean, it's happened before, so it's weird stuff that goes on. We'll see if we see if the feds are going to raise the interest rates here soon. Yeah, probably not. Is there any other questions? We got GE on
That new sewer connection. Has anybody looked at how many connections out there that we have? I don't know when our community service district was formed in 1969. Many homes didn't go on the sewer but remained on the water and eventually made the transition. How many homes do we have out there that could potentially join a sewer connection that are on our water system for that?
So the rate study didn't look at the potential for existing water not connected to sewer if those were connected. We didn't look at it that way. What we did do is just look at the trend over the last few years. When you add a water connection, you add a sewer connection. And it's a good question to consider, I guess. I don't know if that's likely to occur. The district staff could probably answer better than me whether it's likely that those water connections that are not on sewer now, if they would likely to connect.
Or how many are out there? I know that in the past, if it was a single-family residence and they wanted to get an FHRDA loan, the FHRDA would say, you're hooking up for sewer.
I could add one more thing. I know the number of sewer connections is a little lower than the number of water connections. It's not like it's not like 50% of the, you know, it's not something like that. There's maybe, I can't recall off the top of my head, there's maybe a few hundred, or it's somewhere in that range, several hundred, 500, that are not connected to sewer.
I know that trailer park on Diamond Street there, I don't know how long it's been.
Right, and I think historically, and the reality is when you're talking about more connections, you know, we're going to have to get water rights for those connections too. There's not going to be as much building in a lot of new homes. I think most of the new homes are, you know, it's a sewer and water connection. Anyway, it would be like a custom home or something like that that might have their own well. And with the adjudication, you know, there's only going to be so many wells that can be drilled. And nobody can drill a well in this community service district without our permission. So I think it's pretty close. I think, you know, the amount that you might calculate, you know, to spend that time to calculate that there might be a few is really negligible on what the rates would actually be.
Okay.
Any other questions? And remember, tonight we have a number of actions. This is, you're not setting these rates tonight. What you're doing is you're setting your intent to send it out to the public and let the public have their input and decide. And then it's going to come back to you in June 16th at the public hearing, and then we'll move forward from there. So I can still answer questions after you have public comment, except for your
Public comments.
Very detailed, a lot of good information. I've got some questions. I keyed in on the inflation rate. The past 6 years, only 1 year we've been above 3%. A couple of years we were negative. So I have a problem with the assumption of 3%, although it might be an industry standard. The other industry standard I have a question on that you're choosing not to use is in the water study. Typically, you look at times of the year when you have less water usage when you're calculating for the sewer, because it's not a 1 gallon out, 1 gallon back in, because you have evaporation, you have sprinkling, yards, and all those different things. Typically, in a normal industry standard, you would use the low 3 or low 4 months of the year. There's an assumption there that whatever the HCF usage is, it's a 1 per 1 even, and I disagree strongly with that assumption. It needs to be realistic, and it needs to align with industry standard. Is AVEC water chromium 6 free? Is that an assumption also?
It's about, my understanding is they're testing, it's about a 1.
Okay.
So it's, and so that's when we're going through a process now with one of the grant studies of seeing what we're going to do with it.
Okay, future expenses on the rainbow chart, whatever you want to call that thing, when you start to get towards 2030, are you looking at aging infrastructure, the cost of replacing that? Are those not calculated, they're not assumed, right?
That's all calculated within there.
Based on past, or based on history?
Correct.
Okay. The reserve fund, if that's implemented, is that restricted funds, only to be used for the rate? All right. And I think that is, oh, you didn't talk about it. I saw you had tiers for usage. What's the purpose of the tiers? Is that
The tiers,
something you-
basically.
I know what the answer is. I'm just asking him what's his idea of the purpose of the tiers.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm gonna go ahead and answer.
It's the cost of AVEC water. The more that we can't pump, if we have to go and get more water for customers because they're using more, we're going to have to purchase that water, so the purchase price is going to be up.
So with the price going up, is there,
Well, the difference between pumping and going to AVEC.
okay, but is there any kind of desire to get people to use less water in those tiers?
No, absolutely not.
No. Got it. Okay, thank you for your time.
So between the water and the sewer, I mean, do we have a water department here and a sewer department here, or we all together? Is it just one?
We have one department, but by law, it has to be segregated funds. And
Okay.
so, like when our crews go out and work, they work on the sewer, that labor is allocated towards the sewer fund. If they go out and work on water, it's allocated towards, and the whole district functions like that. We have different,
Okay.
not departments, but we have different funds.
My thing is, on the sewer, you got a cost of vacation, holiday time, 86,000. You got a cost for water department, vacation, holiday, at 86,000. So why isn't that just as one 86,000 instead of having two 86,000s?
Charge each one.
Because there's 190,000 total costs.
109,000.
It's not 86 in one and being distributed in the other. It's a total cost being split between the departments as time is allocated.
Okay, so, okay. My next question probably be is how many workers we have that divide this up. I'm just looking at the costs, looking at it like we're being double cost on it. Next thing I was gonna wonder about is, on your sewer costs here, it says here, where am I at? Oh, here, it says proposed sewer rates. Residential here says current is $39.80. Commercial 1 is $39.80. Commercial 2 is $39.80. So a person that owns a business using water all day, clean up everything, being charged the same amount as I am as a residential? I mean, why is there a higher cost on them? More water they're using, correct? It says here in the year 2018, I'm gonna pay $35.89, and they're gonna pay $35.89.
Well, that's on the base rate. And the base rate, what happens is that you calculate what does it cost us here to, run the agency. It's also the infrastructure that we have to fix for them. But they're not just going to pay that. That's only the base rate that's going to recoup the fixed cost. If they're using a lot of water, they're going to be paying.
Well, I'm just
Because
looking where, this should be a little bit higher,
No,
right?
it's the commodity rate that they're going to be using more like that. They can
Okay,
explain to you why they
okay.
kept it the same.
Don't
Okay.
they charge you for water going back down the sewer too? In their charge for that?
The commodity rate for the sewer.
So.
Right, but we don't, this ain't in here what I've seen up here. He answered one of my questions, you had got two questions I was gonna ask, both you guys got them already, but that's one I see here, as you're saying, proposed. It just looks like we're all gonna pay the same as a commercial person, so. Okay, so
This
this,
right here shows the residential and commercial users are 13 cents, commercial 2 are 52 cents because of their usage. This is just the base rate. It's the general
okay, but
base
still,
rate.
commercial one is gonna use a lot more than me. I'm trying to cut down, I'm just worried about my
Right, they're gonna-
grandkids.
They're gonna pay for the water they
Use
use. They're gonna pay for the water
Okay,
they use.
I'm good, thank you.
I'm new to this process. My first time coming to a meeting. I read it in the paper. You guys are having meetings, so I thought I'd come check it out. This 5-year, is this a 5-year rate that you guys do it every 5 years?
Supposed to do it every 5 years.
Supposed to do 5 years?
This is year number 7.
All right, because like we were talking about wet years, if we have, let's say the drought is over, and we got a substantial amount of rain and whatever, north and everything. So if that happens, or how do we, like he was saying that if we get some water coming in, I forget what you call it, from
Yeah, groundwater.
Yeah, from drill water or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Then that'd be cheaper. But that would affect the budget or not, it wouldn't affect us.
Yeah, it could ultimately affect the ratepayers. And what we have to say is, even though there's a drought, there's what I'm calling, for this district in this valley, an adjudicated drought. In other words, it went through the court, and they're restricting how much water we get. So, except for purchasing outside the area. So, if we can get water rights transferred from other entities in this adjudicated drought, then we'll be able to get water cheaper that way. But we're not sure of that. It's just new, and so if we do, then we can maybe lower the rate someday.
Yeah, but when you say someday, but we only do this every 5 years.
No. They could change that. The rate study has to be done every 5 years. But that doesn't mean we can't.
And then how do we get together and decide when the rates come back down? That's all. I'm just asking, how does that happen? It doesn't have to rate for the.
Right.
You know, so who's going to decide that and when? That's what I'm
It
asking.
would be whatever board is sitting at the top.
Well, I guess that's my question I had. Would we do it in August, Brad? That's when we look at that? What's when you're
Typically, when I've seen this done, the rate studies are based on the best information we have available to date. And so as we project out, as Mr. Smith said, we can't protect the weather, we can't protect dry years, all of these other unknown variables. So in the event that we do have a wet year and we can purchase it at a cheaper rate, and we start to put together the budget in April and May, we'll look at that, we'll see if the existing rates will cover the costs at that time, and then we can bring a recommendation to the board to lower the rates at that time.
So it'd be at the fiscal budget.
So it's April or May of the following. That's what I'm correct.
He was talking about communication, you're gonna pump so much, but we went out and bought some land. Tell him about that.
But yeah, we bought some land with some water rights, so right now, but everything's, everything is sort of stagnated right now because we're going through the water master process with this adjudication, and everybody's sort of like holding on to their water rights a little bit, but it could loosen up. We don't know if those water rights are going to be more expensive or they might come out cheap because people are just saying, hey, I just want to make some money and sell my water rights. So, but we don't know. But this agency has had the direction that we want to try to acquire water rights, bank water, water from Northern California to make it as inexpensive delivering the water as we can. Thank you.
The water rights you're protecting.
In the process of the presentation, I crossed out a number of my comments that were answered concerns. We are a water and sewer agency. Most other places aren't. They're a water agency or a sewer. We're two, and it's not a double budget. We budget half the labor for one and half the labor for the other. I understand the need to increase our revenue. I will be voting for a rate increase. We should have begun this study 2 years ago. My concern is while raising the base rate, lowering the consumption rate. This rate structure will eliminate 3 units of water that was included in the base rate. However, increased use of water, the consumption rate, will not bring the same revenue currently received. I worry there may be no real financial incentive for our customers to continue to conserve water. And we do need to plan now for a new rate study. How's the funding new budget list?
And I guess the question I would have,
Well, if I can make one comment, we have to get a clear Dr. Glennan and Ms. Burns can explain it. also, and we knew what point you were making, is on the Capistrano decision, is that there was a court case and you cannot base your rates on trying to get people concerned. And that was the case that came out of Capistrano. And so our rates are directly based on usage and cost. And so that's why we can't do it.
My comment is, we're lowering the consumption rate. When you lower a consumption rate, what happens? People use more of it because it is cheaper. That's my only concern. I'm not concerned about punishing them. And if our rate was okay 4 years ago, why are we lowering it now? That's my only concern.
We're tying the rate to the actual costs. That's what this rate study shows, and that's what this rate structure is designed to do, to comply with the Capistrano case.
I guess my question about the rate study, there's a discussion actually to accept the rate study. Of course, there's been no second, I guess, rejected. My question is, my comment is, the study itself is something that GEI has done, is that correct? And staff. Correct. And staff have prepared that in several months.
A lot of months. It started before I was here.
Okay, I know that. I saw one from November of 2014.
Probably.
Yeah.
At any rate, what I've seen, it doesn't cover everything, but it hits the high points, and it's not something we have to accept or reject as far as what rates we're going to be setting come June 16th. Is that correct?
Correct. I think you could change it and make it lower if you want at that time. I don't think you can raise it if it goes out to 218.
So it's better to have it at least looking high, and we can go down. We can't start low and go up.
Right. And you have to remember that it has to be done with the map. I mean, whether Mr. MacKay said there's some assumptions that he doesn't think is in there, or if you think that other costs should be there, that's something that can be discussed. But if you change it and the rates go up, you're not going to be able to.
Well, this would be a good starting point for us, and I guess we can go down. That would make more sense.
Yes. I just heard something. No, actually, I did second Mr. McKay's whole proposal, but in agreement with what Mr. Glennan was saying, lowering the increasing the base rate and still lowering the consumption rate will impact.
Well, somebody's bill at the end is still going to go up about $8 a month. So, and the thing is, once again, is that the reason why the base rate had to go up is so you can capture the cost, so if you do conserve, you're not losing money.
Where do you get your $8 increase when it shows that it's going to be a $14.89 the first year?
Because that's a combined sewer and water. Yeah.
You're reducing the sewer, right?
Yeah, we're reducing the sewer by about almost $7 a month.
That's independent.
Independent for the water, but what we did was we showed somebody who has a water and sewer bill together, what the low bill would be as using three.
So what we're looking at doing, we're trying to bring up costs and bring up the reserves in the water, reducing the amount of
And to
money.
capture the cost, because
We're going to have less money going into the sewer.
Right, because
So our reserves are going to start balancing out, and not as much go into the reserves for the sewer, while trying to capture.
well,
We need to balance that out.
well, here's the thing, is that we're trying to calculate what the actual costs are to base the rates on actual costs. So it would not be prudent to say, well, we want to raise the sewer rates just so we can capture more money.
No, I'm not
Right,
saying that.
right.
We're talking right now, we've got the sewer rates, it's generating appropriate reserves right now. Now you're talking about lowering.
Because when we did the analysis, the cost, what we found is that the cost is more accurate this way. Is that there might have been, we don't want to capture too much money from it. So we want to make it where it's the actual cost. And so that's why we're doing it.
But you said we could change it.
Right. Can't raise it. So that's the reason why
If you put out your notices under 218, based on these numbers, you may lower from there at the hearing. You may not increase.
To increase the standard of living in Rosamond, to make water more available to people, to, if they want to grow gardens, if they want to grow other things, you're going to encourage responsible, reasonable use use of water. And that has always been our mission. I think it's going to continue to be our mission. For us to sit here and think we're going to be a governor, Jerry Brown, and tell people we're going to punish you for having a green lawn, that's not our business. And that's what I'm hearing is we want to punish people with higher commodity rates. No, we need to, I think if anything, we need to move those commodity rates back over to the fixed costs, and a higher rate on that. But for the purpose of getting this enrollment, I think I would be in favor of accepting this study.
We got a motion on the floor. Seconded, right?
The motion on the floor is to reject the study.
All in favor? Let's roll call vote. Roll call vote? No, I don't think so.
No.
I'm asking for a roll call vote. Oh, you're asking for a no, not how you vote. Okay.
Vice President Olaf Landsgaard,
I'm voting against the rejection of this study.
Director Dennis Shingeldecker, Director Byron Glennan,
I'm voting for the rate study.
That's not the motion on the floor.
Is to
The
reject
motion
it.
on the floor is to reject the rate study,
I
so.
vote against that.
Director Ed MacKay,
For.
President Alfred Wallis.
Motion fails. The two yeses were Directors MacKay and Shingeldecker. The noes were Glennan, Wallis, and that's me.
I move we accept the rate study as presented.
Allison, can you do the others two items as one vote?
Yes, if it is the board's inclination, new business items A, B, and C would be moved as a single item, if that is your pleasure.
I would move A, B, and C as a single item.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. B and C?
Any noes?
Any no?
No, I'm sorry, no. No. No.
That was, the motion carried with Directors Shingeldecker and MacKay voting no.
It's for the pool that everybody wanted open, so staff went out and looked and see what's reasonable out there and what has changed with Lancaster and Palmdale with their rates. And so you're doing the fee schedule for the pool, but you're doing two administrative things. You're taking the fees and pulling them out of the administrative code. The board always has to pass the fee schedule, but the attorneys have decided it shouldn't really be in the administrative code, it should be a separate item. The other thing that shouldn't be in the administrative code is the application and the questionnaire for like criminal background. That changes when the California state legislature changes things, and so we might have to change that, and that's something that can be done by staff, and it doesn't have to be in the administrative code. So the attorneys are asking that we pull those two things out, but also that you approve, so that with this one motion of the resolution, it all has it in there, you'll be pulling those two items out of the administrative code and passing the pool fees for this summer.
And I noticed from the air that the pool looks pretty good. Is it something you can go swimming in tomorrow?
We're not gonna allow you to go swimming in it tomorrow. But yeah, the pool's looking good. Yeah, everything's coming along good. We got lifeguard, pool manager, some consultants on. It's coming along good.
Projected date opening still like me?
What we're hoping for is at 12 o'clock on May 21st, we're going to have a party with some refreshments and everything, and do a little ribbon cutting, let the kids jump in the pool on the 21st. And then we'll open it up fully on the weekend of the 28th.
And you can buy a season pass for $50 in the last September 1st, or?
I don't have the fees memorized, so
Okay.
I'd have to look at them. So it's whatever they say there.
Could it last till September 1st, or when will the season be?
Yeah, I think we're going through September, or when school starts usually, I think is what the agency has always done.
Well, it starts here like August 8th, so.
Then it would be like, maybe September 1st.
Any other directors, questions?
I make a motion to adopt resolution
Do we need public comments?
2000-9.
No, we can make the motion first.
Well,
We can have the motion first.
You have the motion first.
So we have a motion, now we need a second, and then we can go to public comment.
I'll second.
All in favor?
No.
This is
No.
roll call.
No.
Public comment.
Public comment.
Public comments, go ahead.
Any comment on the fee structure?
I've got one comment. I would just recommend if you're gonna have the season September 1st, take it to after Labor Day.
That's not the motion on the floor.
Okay,
Whatever, you could make that suggestion though.
that's my suggestion.
Okay.
Olaf Landsgaard,
Aye.
Director Shingeldecker,
Yes.
Director MacKay,
Yes.
Director Byron Glennan,
Yes.
President Alfred Wallis.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, director's reports, comments?
The only reportable item is that AVAC management expects another increase in its water allotment because of the effects of El Nino. Right now, they're at 45% allotment, and all they can tell us is that they expect a increase. They don't tell us how much. I also attended the Water Master Adjudication meeting in Palmdale, April the 13th, 2016. And the Water Management Board is still comprised of only 3 members. The landowners group is struggling to appoint their 2 members. And also, a motion has been filed by Antelope Valley United Mutuals Group et al. For implementing the judgment regarding Water Master formation to be held on May 17th, 2016 at 9 a.m. in room 222 of the Los Angeles County Superior Court at 11 North Hill Street, Los Angeles. Also, I was part of a Aqua webinar held April the 14th, 2016, and a consensus of the webinar is that the State Water Resources Board will not introduce any legislation to be acted on in 2016. It is expected that the State Water Resources Board will introduce legislation in the 2017 legislative year on drought containment. That's the end of my report.
Any other director comments?
Yes. On Thursday, when the power remains on at the Hummel Hall, the head of the Kern County Council, Teresa Goldner, will be coming to Rosamond to explain the 5th District decision on the marijuana dispensaries in Kern County. My understanding is that there's been a series of losses by the county in the 5th District, whereas the dispensaries are now back to where they were in 2009, which means they can locate within 1,000 feet of the school, or outside 1,000 feet of the school, pardon me, and as long as they're in a commercially zoned area, and they're treated like pharmacies. So it'll be interesting to see what her comments are. If you're interested in that, that'd be a good one to hear from. There are other couple other items to hear from here. We've been on the Municipal Advisory Council meeting. It's basically a town hall. Generally heard from the Kern County Sheriff, CHP, and some other folks as well. So it's a good place to go and get your information. That's this Thursday night at 7 o'clock at Hummel Hall. And I think that's all I've got for this point.
Anyone else?
Jesse Dallywall has sent it to San Diego because they're more, they've done more of this tertiary water. GEI was sent some comments. Some of the comments seemed repetitious. That were the same comments they sent GEI before. So right now GEI is looking at it. Before it seemed like a lot of perfunctory stuff of moving this from page 1 to page 2 and addressing these, like how many alarms do we have and different things like that. And so it's up there, but remember it's the state. And so they work at their pace. And so we had their supervisors down here in person, and they actually said they were going to try to expedite it. But that's where we are right now.
Okay. General Council update.
Prior meeting, I had updated you regarding AB 1707, which would have affected the district's obligations and would have impacted costs with regard to the Public Records Act. AB 1707 is now dead in committee, so we need no longer worry about those costs and associated issues arising from that bill. I have nothing further at this time.
Nothing else. I think you asked about the tertiary water thing. Everything's doing good. We have our guys in here from the league. Look like you can tell because of how muddy they look, and so everything else is going good. We got an update on the pool and how that's going along. So things are looking good.
We're going to hear from the Assistant General Manager.
He's here.
No update.
No.
Director of Finance.
No update at this time.
Director of Public Works.
appearance. We just came back from the 4th service line repair since the last board meeting. This one was a major leak that required a lot of extra help. We've done that. We've also done 6 angle stop repairs, continued the installation of master meters throughout the district. We did 40 lockoffs for non-payment. The staff is in the middle of monthly meter reading right now. On Friday, we had an inspection from the State Department of Drinking Water. We'll be receiving a report in the next few weeks, but everything went as planned, and we're continuing on pool repairs, getting ready to open. That's Ron stated. That's all I have.
Thank you. The question I have is, how come is between you and John, and then both went the same league? You're all dirty, he's not.
Probably runs the pump truck.
It has to do with real estate. When the hole's only this big, they throw the smallest guy in there.